Hello, everyone. So this is going to be a brief introduction to character ethics, virtue ethics, and criticisms of virtue ethics. So I'm going to refer to John Doris and his book, Lack of Character. So the book is long, and I'm not going to have you read it, but I did want to point out a situationist critique of character ethics. There are two important features of character I want to point out that John Doris points out. The first is that virtues are supposed to be robust. So you can think of our virtue of courage, which I'm sure we've been discussing a bunch in class. If a person has a robust trait, they can be confidently expected to display trait-relevant behavior across a wide variety of trait-relevant situations, even where some or all of these situations are not optimally conducive to such behavior. So virtues should be cross-situational. I'm not just displaying the virtue of courage on the battlefield, but I also display the virtue of courage when I have to stand up against my racist uncle. They are not situation dependent, they're situation invariant. I will show courage at work as well as at home, as well as with my friends. The second feature I want to point out about virtues is that they should be integrated. So unity is necessary for executing one's projects in the face of obstacles. So we think that our virtues need to be integrated into our lives. So maybe we've discussed the unity of the virtues thesis. In order to be courageous, we also have to be truthful. In order to be courageous, we also have to be witty. We have to have this integrity, right? So we have to think about the integrity of a bridge. A bridge has integrity if it's structurally sound. So these virtues have to be invariant to the, whether it's the battlefield or at home, but they also have to be structurally sound, right? They have to be kind of throughout my life. Okay, so globalism about character, and Aristotle and virtue ethicists would be considered globalists, think that characters are consistent, stable, and integrated, right? So their consistency about character traits, they think they can manifest these character traits over diverse trait-relevant eliciting conditions. That's what they call it, just trait-relevant eliciting conditions. They're stable. Character traits are reliably manifested over iterated trails of similar trait-relevant eliciting conditions, right? So they're stable, and they're evaluatively integrated. In a given character or personality, the occurrence of a trait with particular evaluative valence is probabilistically related to the occurrence of other traits with similar evaluative valences. So if I am honest, I'm also likely to be brave. If I am witty, I'm also likely to be truthful. So let me read that again. In a given character or personality, the occurrence of a trait with a particular evaluative valence, like a positive valence, like it's good to be courageous, is probabilistically related to the occurrence of other traits with similar evaluative valences. So it's equated with having other sorts of traits, like I'm courageous is probably related to me also being truthful. Here come the situationists. The situationists about character come in, they say, uh-oh, character traits are not robust, they're not integrated. And globalism about character is wrong because character traits do not show consistency, they do not show stability, and they do not show this evaluative integration. Bump, bump, bump. And how do they do this? They say, let's look at the data. Does the data bear out the fact that these character traits are stable and integrated, right? So here are three things that the situationists believe. They say behavioral variation across populations owe more to situational differences than dispositional differences. Uh-oh. So behavioral variation, how I act in a particular situation or how people act over across populations, it's more due to situational factors than it has to do with dispositional factors. So dispositions like having a character trait. Whether I show generosity has a lot less to do with whether I'm generous than it has to do with certain situational differences, which we'll talk about. That's their first claim. Second claim, systematic observation problematizes the attribution of robust traits. So if I actually look at the data and I try to do these experiments, people are not showing robust character traits. And then third, personality is not often evaluatively integrated. So Evaluatively inconsistent dispositions seem to cohabitate in single persons. So we have people that are very courageous and unbelievably untruthful, right? So it doesn't seem like this unity of the virtues thesis works at all. So let's think about some of the empirical literature that these folks decide to talk about. One is one that we've talked about before, Kitty Genovese and compassion. So think about that poor woman in the apartment building who's getting stabbed. No one calls the police. This is often the case people talk about when they talk about the bystander effect. And when the cops come and they ask all these people, like, why didn't you do anything? They all said, I assume someone else had called the cops. So whether someone or not did something seems to have less to do with compassion than it has to do with the situation, namely the fact that they think other people have called. And this is asking people to be minimally decent Samaritans, right? Just making a phone call to say, hey, there's a woman in my courtyard getting stabbed. This is not asking people to go above and beyond. And it seems like if someone thinks someone else will do it, they just don't do it. So that's one of the experiments or life facts that people point to or situations point to say there may not be globalism about character. Another one is called the dime experiment. So imagine someone back in the day when we had payphones, you'd put in a quarter. Sometimes the call only costs like 15 cents and you would get like a dime or a nickel back in the payphone, like just your change. And so they decided they'd see people who, if they got a dime back, if they were more likely to help someone who'd kind of spilled their groceries or their books, right? And so they would watch people either get the dime or not get the dime. And then they would have an actor like drop all their books on the ground and see if someone would come and actually help them. So if you found a dime, you were much more likely to help the person who spilled their books everywhere. So people, here's just like the breakdown. 14 people helped when they found a dime and 2 people didn't help. When only 1 person helped when they didn't find a dime and 24 people didn't help. So it seems like the situational factor that determines whether or not you will help another human being in like a minor, inconvenience if they spill their books or their groceries is whether or not you found a dime or whether something small good happened to you right before that, rather than some robust trait that you might have that you're a helping or generous person. And again, this is a minimally decent Samaritan case. We're not asking you to go above and beyond. We're just saying, hey, will you take 30 seconds out of your day to like gather some books and help someone with their books or their groceries? It seems like you're much more likely to help if some small good thing has just happened to you. All right, here's a third case. It's called group effects, diffusion of responsibility. Okay, so imagine you go in for a job interview and there's you and a bunch of other candidates in a waiting room. And okay, they've done this experiment a bunch of times. This is bad. So you're in the waiting room. There's like 10 other people there. Their smoke starts to pour into the waiting room. If everyone else in the room acts like it's totally normal, only 10% of people report the smoke or say anything about it, compared to 75% if you're alone. If you're the only person in the room and smoke starts coming in, 75% of people complain to, let's say, the receptionist, hey, there's smoke in the waiting room. If you're there and there's other people there and everyone's acting unbothered, it's only 10% of people who respond or say something about it. Okay, what does that say? That says, again, a lot of how you respond is how the other people in the room are responding. Here's my favorite one. It's called the Good Samaritan. And it's obviously the Good Samaritan is a story in the Bible about a Samaritan who stops, right? A Samaritan was kind of a group of people that were often looked down upon. And the Good Samaritan in the Bible stops and helps and renders aid to someone, gets them a place to stay, gives them some medical aid. Okay, so here's the updated Good Samaritan experiment at Princeton Theological Seminary. So one really wonderful school. They decided what they were going to do is ask Samaritans, people who were on their way to get their degrees in religion, to give a lecture on the Good Samaritan. So you've been asked to this theological campus, and you're going to be giving a lecture on the Good Samaritan, that story from the Bible, about helping behavior. Then on the way to the lecture hall, they manufactured 3 types of conditions, and we're going to call those low hurry conditions, medium hurry conditions, and high hurry conditions. And so they, would kind of interfere, like, oh my gosh, you only have 30 seconds to get to your lecture, or you have 5 minutes to get to your lecture, or you have plenty of time to get to your lecture. Now, from where you are to the lecture hall, they have an actor who's acting like they need some aid. This is a person who's slumped in a doorway. Maybe they've got shallow breathing. They look like they need medical aid rendered. This is exactly the Good Samaritan, right? This is the story that they're supposed to be giving the lecture on. Those are people, again, these are theological students giving a lecture on the Good Samaritan. Those that were in low hurry conditions, oh, you've got plenty of time to get to the lecture hall, 63% of those people stopped to help what they didn't know was the actor, but the actor who looked like they needed aid, medical aid. 45% of the Sumerians stopped in medium hurry conditions. Oh, you only have 5 or 10 minutes to get to the lecture hall. But in high hurry conditions where they said, oh my gosh, you need to give your lecture in 1 or 2 minutes, only 10% of these theological students stopped to help the person who required medical aid, even though they were that very day giving a lecture on the Good Samaritan. And so what do people take from this? They take from this that whether you're in a hurry or not is the predicting factor of whether or not you will help, not whether you're a religious person or, anything else. It's just, are you in a hurry? There are 2 other types of experiments that the situationists often refer to. And I'm going to have you can Google, again, I give you free rein to look at any of these, the Milgram experiments and the Stanford prison experiments. Both of them are pretty wretchedly horrible, and both of them show whether or not you would shock someone when you're being told. They're both authority, kind of like, if an authority figure is asking you to shock another human being, will you do it? That's the Milgram experiments. That experiment would not be allowed to be run today. And then the Stanford prison experiments, if you haven't seen a video about that, it's worth looking at. The Stanford prison experiments randomly assigned people the role of a prisoner or a guard. And depending on randomly assigning them the role, they acted out that role the guards rather ruthlessly. And so again, it was a random assignment. It wasn't based on character traits or personality traits. You were randomly assigned a role. And again, this is supposed to be the situationist, that it's the random circumstances that you're in that determine your behavior, not any robust character trait. So hopefully you can see how this presents a problem to people who are virtue ethicists. You look at these experiments and you say there's no such thing as robust character traits. What I want you to do for this assignment is think about these experiments. So go look either at the Stanford prison experiments or the Milgram experiments. And then tell me how you think the virtue ethicist should respond. Is this a biting critique of virtue ethics, or can the virtue ethicist easily respond to these sort of empirical worries about virtue? And we'll leave it there.